Hello folks, Scott here with the new My Monthly Hero April of 2023 kit. As usual, our kits come in these 8x10 zippered pouches. Let's see what we got this month. It looks like we are going with flowers this month. Oh, all sorts of stamps. Here's our little backer card. Let's see what we've got. We have our clear stamp set, 6" by 8" clear stamp set, which is all flowers and pots. There's a little picture there, some flourishes, some small patterns as well, a bunch of mix and match sentiments. You're timeless, you're a good friend, you're appreciated, you're a rare flower, you're forever young. Of course, we get matching dies for these, and this month we are treated to sentiment dies. So we've got dies for all of our sentiments on this stamp set. Always love it when we get sentiment dies along with our kit. We also get 2 background texture cling stamps. These are each 2 1/4 by 3 inches. So double that up, and that's 5.5 by 6. We've got a text stamp and this nice texture, kind of like a linen texture. Both of those cling stamps, excellent background textures. We get 4 ink cubes. This is all the Hero Hues core inks. We've got Butterbar, Crimson, Green Apple, and Bermuda, and a roll of fancy script washi tape. This looks really nice, a simple black and white script washi tape. That's everything in the classic kit. And then for our premium kit, we get some extras. We get a die set. Oh my goodness, that's 20 dies, flowers and flower pots. 20 dies. We've got curved foliage and straight foliage, all sorts of flowers and vases. Goodness, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6 vases here. 20 flower and vases fancy dies, and a doodles stencil. So this stencil has a number of different doodly things like rainbowies. This is kind of raindrops or just straight lines, wiggles, a little sunburst type thing, a little doodles pattern stencil, and maybe my favorite in this whole kit, this adorable batch of enamel stickers. Love these. These are right up my alley. I love those colors. Love the little squiggles and circles and X's and O's. Self-adhesive assorted shapes of enamel stickers. And that is everything in the new My Monthly Hero April 2023 kit, both the classic and the premium kit. Looks like we're not going to wait for the April showers to bring the May flowers. We've got the April flowers right here. And here we have my 10 cards for the month. Everything on white card bases this month. I tell you, there is so much stuff in this kit. You realize there are 40 dies in the premium kit. Oh my God, I just think that's kind of amazing. Of course, I'm going to start out, I'm going to do my first 5 cards just using the items in the classic kit. Then we'll add in the premium kit pieces. I decided to start out fairly simple, and we have our Thanks a Bunch card. I love those texture background stamps. So handy for creating backgrounds and extra textures on your cards. I stamped the Texture Weave Cling Stamp in the center of a white A2 card base. I used Hero Hues Granite Core ink. I did wipe down the edges of the cling stamp a bit to soften them. I stamped the hashtag pattern stamp on top using Hero Hues charcoal ink, charcoal core ink, so a couple of different grays in the background. I stamped the vase and the flower bundle using Hero Art's Intense Black ink on some Bristol Smooth cardstock and colored the flowers with my Zig Clean Color Real Brush markers. Now, I actually used the Bermuda ink cube to watercolor the vase, but the core ink didn't quite behave as a simple watercolor. I should probably stick to reactive inks if I want to watercolor with them. But I was able to get a decent blend on the vase, and after that dried, I fussy cut a negative mask from some thermoweb masking paper and stamped the circular texture stamp on the vase using the Bermuda ink cube. Once that was dry, I die cut the flowers and vase with their matching dies. I glued them together and mounted them to the card front with foam tape. I stamped the sentiment on some 110-pound cardstock using the Bermuda ink and die cut it out. I attached the sentiment with more foam tape, and that's our first card. Thanks a bunch. That's a decent little pun there, and the colors really pop on that simple two-tone gray background. Thanks a bunch. So all of the online descriptions of this kit really played up the multimedia aspects of this kit. Okay, I can go there. Let's try this. Here is a Forever Young card. Now, I often reach for my Tim Holtz pattern papers when creating a multimedia card, and this background is from this. This is Tim Holtz Collage Mini Stash. I found this great little, it actually says Student Handbook on it, one of those papers. I embellished that background pattern paper with some of the text pattern cling stamp using charcoal ink. You can really see it there, and on this left side there's some there. I added some white ink splatters as well. I stamped the flowers, the leaves, and the picture on Bristol Smooth cardstock with intense black ink, colored them with my Zig markers, and die cut them out. The sentiment is stamped on some matching Tim Holtz pattern paper with Versamark ink, embossed with some white embossing powder, and die cut with the matching die. I added these little swirls on the picture using the smaller swirl die colored with green apple and the Bermuda ink cubes, and trimmed down and then glued to the picture. So there's a little texture to that picture as well. A white gel pen adds some highlights to the stamped and colored images. I laid out my arrangement on the background and planned out these green swirl stamps. Notice how you don't see the tail of any of them. They're either hidden behind this stamping or off the edge of the card. I stamped them all with Versamark ink and embossed them with some Love from Lizzie Atlantis green embossing powder. This is about the only green embossing powder I have, and it's really nice because it's got a gold tone to it. Once it's melted, it like turns into this nice green and gold embossing. I thought that worked really well on this card. I die cut the background panel with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die, and I ink blended some walnut stained Distress Oxide ink around the edges. I glued that to a thin white mat and then to a thicker auburn pearl mat, and then down to an A2 white card base. I attached the picture, leaves and flowers, and sentiment to the card front with foam tape, and I added a happy birthday sentiment to the inside of the card. Happy birthday. That's a nice sentiment for any of us getting a little bit older. This stamp is from the Hero Arts Mini Everyday Messages stamp set. I don't think that's available anymore. It complements this cover sentiment perfectly. This one's a little bit more multimedia for you. Forever Young. Now, I have to admit, I'm not particularly well-versed on the art of flower arranging. I've used the two pre-arranged flowers stamps in the kit. Now I have to turn my attention to the single bloom stamps. Well, when I realized that the large bloom stamp had 2 6-petal layers, and we have that rare flower sentiment, I knew what I had to do. You're a rare flower. A black and white card certainly makes this rainbow bloom stand out. I covered a plain panel of white cardstock with our washi tape, lining up the text between the strips, and then I die cut that panel with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die. I completed the cut along the stitched lines and removed the excess washi tape on the edges. That gave us a nice little white frame around that washi tape. Then the seams started to bug me. So I took some little thin black peel off stickers and laid those over the seams, used those as part of the pattern. That looks like it's all one piece almost, with just some nice diagonals going through that. I added a black mat to the washi background and glued both of them down to a white card base. I stamped, colored, and cut the bloom and the sentiments both of them, just like the first two cards, and I die cut 2 of the large leaf die from some 110-pound cardstock. I did use a small stylus to add little veins to the center of each leaf. That adds a lot of detail to an otherwise plain die cut. It's quite easy. All the die cuts are attached to the card front with foam tape. I really like that washi tape background, and you know, I can't imagine a more rare flower. You're a rare flower. So I was digging around in my stash looking for more multimedia pieces that I could possibly up my multimedia card making with. So for our next card here, we've got our Get Well Soon card. Now this one actually started with this simple little square in the center. This is 2 1/4 by 3 1/2 inch scrap of white cardstock, and I directly inked those with squares of the Butter Bar, Green Apple, and Crimson Core inks, the cubes that we got in our kit, and just pushed them down, 2 of them on each. Now that Butter Bar was so juicy that I pressed it down. That one just went everywhere. I had so much ink on this little panel that I just grabbed an ink blending brush and just blended everything together. So that gave us some nice light color around the edges, and it's still seeable. You can still see those 6 little squares of color. Well, when that panel dried, and it took a long time to dry, I stamped the texture weave cling stamp with intense black ink, and then I embossed the text cling stamp with white in just a couple of places. I stamped the flower on some Bristol Smooth cardstock with Versamark ink, and then I lengthened the stem with a Versa marker pen. Just continued the stamp stem down for a little ways, and then embossed all of that with Hero Art's gold embossing powder. I colored this with my Zig markers and die cut the bloom and just the beginning of the stem, and then I fussy cut the rest of the stem. The sentiment is stamped, embossed with gold, and die cut just the same. Now, I have this old 8x8 die cuts with a view paper pack called the Fiber Stack. This is old, been in my stash for a long time. It's filled with these great textured cardstock pieces. The orange mat and the red stripe is from that pad, and I tore their edges just using a metal ruler. Instead of cutting them, I tore their edges so they're really soft, almost fuzzy edges on that orange textured paper and that red stripe on the left here. So I glued that red stripe down to my card base. I glued the orange behind my stamped background. I added some more gold embossing using that little tile stamp just to the right of that red strip. You can see that shiny gold embossing. And then a piece of lace, a little piece of lace next to that, and then a thin pinstripe peel-off sticker on the side. This little white textured rope on the left is a bit of paper string unwound just a little bit. I added some white speckles on the inked background. I mounted the flower and the sentiment with foam tape and added the whole matted piece to the center of the card front with more foam tape. How's that for multimedia? I do love the look of this card. Get well soon. So I do have a few more image stamps in our stamp set that I wanted to get to. This card happened just by fooling around with the unused stamps. And we've got You're Amazing. Nothing planned, totally random stamping here, but I love it. Those blooms and buds are colored with my Prismacolor colored pencils. Of course, they're stamped in intense black ink. None of this is embossed, colored with my colored pencils. And then I did add the small swirl stamps for filler, embossed with the Love from Lizzie Pastel Purple Party embossing powder. This has got lots of glitter to them. It has some big chunks of holographic glitter in it, but I thought that purple went great with our purple flowers. I cut the stamped and colored panel to 5 inches by 1 3/4 inches. I glued that to a thin black mat and then a thicker metallic purple mat, and then down to the center of a white A2 card base. The sentiment is stamped with grape slush reactive ink and embossed with some clear embossing powder. For some reason, I am totally taken with this card. It must be the thrill of ignoring my obsessive anal retentive control issues and just going with the flow. Okay, that's my 5 cards from the classic kit. I even managed to use all of the image stamps in that stamp set. Of course, we have more sentiments to go. And now we get to play with the premium parts too. Now you give me 20 foliage and flower and vase dies, and my mind is automatically going to go graphic. So our first card here is You're a Good Friend. I think I was struck by the large size of this leaf die. These are all die cut from some simple textured green, yellow, and orange cardstock. The yellow is actually cut on the back side, so there's no texture on that. But I thought combining a smooth cardstock and a textured cardstock worked really well with these flowers. These are not inlaid either. There's a whole yellow flower on the back, then the orange is glued on top of that, then the yellow is glued on top of that with the centers. They're not inlaid, they are layered. I spaced out the leaf die cuts on the front of an A2 card base, tried to keep them just as straight as possible. Got a little curve down there. And I glued the flowers down at the ends. Some extra dots from the centers of the flowers fill in the white spaces above and below the flowers. The sentiment is stamped in green apple reactive ink. Now notice the ink in our kit is green apple core ink. The green reactive ink, the green apple reactive ink is a much darker green. This is much closer to the key lime fizz reactive ink in the core ink value. So anyway, just so you know. So I did stamp the sentiment in green apple reactive ink. I embossed it with clear embossing powder, and I die cut those with the matching dies. I added those to the center of the card using foam tape, and I really like the bold graphic here. You're a good friend. Now with our premium dies, I felt like the flowers had obvious matching stems and leaves that they went with. I thought every flower had a different matching stem or leaf. I thought these two went together. You're timeless. And look at that background paper. I couldn't resist going back to that Tim Holtz pattern paper for this card. It's a little touch of perfect with a sentiment like that. I die cut this pattern paper with a Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die and blended some walnut stained Distress Oxide ink around the edges, glued it to a matching Tim Holtz pattern paper mat, and then down to a white card base. Now the vase is die cut from more of that fiber cardstock and stenciled with the straight doodle stencil and some creamsicle reactive ink. I added a mat around that vase by die cutting a second vase in black, splitting it down the center, and then gluing it to the back of my orange die cut, just spreading it out a little bit to give us some black outline on the sides. Now little strips of black cardstock finish out the top and bottom of that mat. I think that highlights that vase really nicely. The leaves and stems are die cut from the same textured green cardstock, and I did add some simple veins with a stylus. The flowers are die cut from some watercolor cardstock just for a little added texture, and the petal texture I added with a stylus as well. Those little petal veins, I don't think you call them veins. The centers are cut for some yellow cardstock and layered on top of the white flowers. I glued the flowers to their stems and arranged 3 in the vase and attached those to the card front with foam tape. So a little foam tape behind the vase, foam tape behind each bloom. The flower on the ground is glued directly to the card front. The nice thing about these dainty little stems is that you can give them a little curve quite easily. So the sentiment is stamped on matching pattern paper with Versamark ink and embossed in white, die cut with the matching dies, and mounted with foam tape. I was able to squeeze those really tight together. They almost look like one sentiment there. For a final touch, I found these little gold glitter wooden stars in my stash, and I glued them to the card front. I don't know why, I thought they went really well with this. I then added little spots of gold gel pen to the centers of the flower to add another little touch of gold on this card. Now this would make a great birthday card, You're Timeless. I also think it would be fun for other occasions as well. Again, I thought some of those flowers and leaves were meant to go together, so we have Your Appreciated card with this great big bouquet in this short little pot here. This is that interesting leaf die that had double of those kind of like hands reaching out, and then these, I call them like little buttercup flowers. I'm not quite sure what they are. So this background is an old Derice Moroccan geometric background die cut from watercolor cardstock and glued to a white card base. I stamped the texture weave stamp on more Tim Holtz pattern paper using walnut stained distress oxide ink. I trimmed that down to size and glued that to the bottom of the die cut on the card front. Now I did ink up some white cardstock using the included core inks, and I overlapped the green and the blue pretty well here to give us even a new green. I die cut the stems from the green inking and the blooms from the butter bar inking. I did supplement those stems. I needed a couple more stems, so I did supplement those stems with a few of them cut from some watercolor pattern paper that I happen to have in my stash. I added a little shading to the blooms with alcohol marker and some highlights with white gel pen. I cut off a couple of the top leaves. These were double leaves. I cut off the top leaf of some of these shorter flowers and then glued the flowers and the stems together. Now I die cut the vase from some plain orange cardstock. I did some ink blending and stenciling with the walnut stained distressed oxide ink, and I added highlights with a white gel pen. I like that. It looks very much like a clay pot. I glued the flowers on the vase and added all to the card front with foam tape on the vase and on each bloom. So each bloom has a little piece of foam tape behind it. It gives it all really nice dimension. Now, I wasn't actually going to use this sentiment. I thought it was a little too similar to the thanks a bunch sentiment or thank you, but my sister called me this week just to say hi and catch up. She actually left a message for me that said that she just wanted to tell me that I was appreciated. Well, that was enough for me. The sentiments are stamped on 110-pound cardstock, again with that walnut stained distress oxide ink and embossed with clear embossing powder. I die cut those and added them to the card front with foam tape. I did use some green enamel stickers to add a little bit of bling to this card. Now, I've actually used every stamp in our stamp set now, and I know I'm going to have to send this one off to my sister to let her know how much she inspires me. You're appreciated. Of course, it is that time of year again when our thoughts turn to Mom and we reach for new ways to show her our affections. And we have Happy Mother's Day. My Mother's Day card always look like lilies to me. So the background sports that triple rainbow stencil all along the left side. I stenciled that with grape slush, splash, key lime fizz, lemon drop, creamsicle, and fruit punch reactive inks, and then I blended some lemon drop ink over the whole panel. I trimmed that to 5 inches by 3 3/4 inches, added a thin black mat, and glued those to a white card base. So the leafy stems are die cut from my inked up panel with simple veins etched in them with a little stylus. And the flowers are die cut from watercolor cardstock again with a little butter bar ink blended at their bases. I glued the flowers to their stems, arranged the flowers together, and added a little extra greenery that was trimmed from the bottom of the flower stems in the sides here to fill out our arrangement. Now the vase is die cut. Look at that shiny vase. The vase is die cut from some more watercolor pattern paper from my stash. Here's what it is. This is a big old stash. You can see my die cut right there. And the curvy stripes are stenciled on with the crimson core ink. Very light with that. I wanted more of a glass or a ceramic effect for this vase, so I simply covered the whole thing with clear packing tape and then trimmed the edges to match. So we've got a nice gloss vase here for you. I really like that. It works great, and you don't have to wait forever for your glossy accents to dry. I then glued the assembled flowers onto the vase. I had a couple of Happy Mother's Day stamps in my stash, but nothing would really fit effectively on the card. I didn't want to cover up the stenciling, and those flowers really take up a lot of real estate. I fiddled with a number of options, and finally I came up with this one. I die cut the Happy from old Alpha dies in my stash from some of that same watercolor pattern paper. Here you can see the HAPPY. I cut from that same page of watercolor as the vase, and then twice from some thick black cardstock. I glued all 3 layers together to make this chunky kind of shadowed sentiment, and I gave all the letters some shine with the Spectrum Noir sparkle pen. The Mother's Day stamp is from last year's April of 22 My Monthly Hero Kit. Mother's Day right there. And I stamped that directly on the card front using intense black ink, and I did emboss that with some clear embossing powder as well. I glued the Happy directly to the card, added the vase and flowers using foam tape, and I added some of the yellow enamel stickers for a little more shine. I so very rarely do a sideways sentiment. I'm a little surprised at how terrific I think this looks, and you can bet that this is the card that I'll be sending out for Mother's Day this year. Happy Mother's Day. I don't think my mom watches these videos, so she'll still be surprised. Okay, so it looks like I'm not going to get to every one of those vase dies in the premium kit. I did have plans to do a vases only card with some cute pun like Kiss My Vase, or I Never Forget a Vase, or even, here's one for you. How about the 7 Vases of Dr. Lau? I decided to go with a different pun instead, and here we have, you know you make me want to sprout. Yes, this makes me giggle. And this actually uses up those last 3 drops stencils as well. So on a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch panel of white cardstock, I stamped the Texture Weave Cling Stamp down here with the green apple core ink, and the Text Cling Stamp with some intense black ink. I stenciled the 3 drops patterns using the green apple ink across the bottom, the butter bar ink up the side, and then splash reactive inks for the little blue stencils. Now the leaves and the stems are die cut from the last scraps of my inked up cardstock, and the flowers are die cut from some watercolor cardstock and ink blended with lemon drop and creamsicle reactive inks. And actually that's walnut stain reactive ink on their flower centers. I layered the flowers together, added some white gel pen highlights, and glued them to their stems. The vases are die cut from some auburn pearl cardstock, a nice pearlescent shine on both of those. Didn't have to use any packing tape there. And the small vase is trimmed off the bottom or top, depending on how you look at it, of the small vase dies. And that's actually the bottom here, just flipped around. I added a little shadow to both vases with a little touch of alcohol marker, and I glued the flowers onto the large vase. I fussy cut this sprout from one of the excised leaves from card number 8. So I kind of just followed the lower bit here and then the bigger bit here and cut that little sprout out of one of those extra leaf pieces. I glued that little sprout to my small little vase and added both to the card front with foam tape. I printed this sentiment on a scrap of white cardstock using my Silhouette software and my favorite Brady Bunch remastered font. I did some partial die cutting with the Lawn Fawn stitched rectangle die to size it properly and added it to the card front with foam tape. I really like the multimedia effect achieved here by just using the stamps and stencils, and I think that pedestal vase is probably my favorite vase die in this kit. And of course, I love the pun and that adorable little sprout. You know you make me want to sprout. Raise your hand up and sprout. I thought that was a fun way to round out our kit this month. 10 cards, just like that. There is so much stuff in this kit this month. You can explore the multimedia aspects of this kit or just keep it simple and graphic and flowery. So ultimately, I did use all of the stamps in this kit. I didn't get to every die. There are 40 of them. I used all of the ink cubes and some of the washi tape and all of the doodle stencils. I used all of the doodle stencils and even a few enamel stickers. That's lots and lots of flowers this month. But I do think I was able to come up with a good variety of looks and designs for what's ultimately a lovely batch of cards. This kit is still available, both the classic and the premium, at Hero Arts. If I've managed to fertilize your spring flower bug or planted some new ideas in your head and you'd like to grab this kit before it sells out, please use my links in the description down below when you go shopping at Hero Arts. I'm always grateful when you do, and it really does help support this channel. Thank you so very much for sharing some of your time here with me today. Let me know which card or cards are your favorite, and if you have any questions, I am continually honored by your attention, and I'm always inspired to make your time here as pleasant as possible. Please remember to like me, list me, pin me, post me, share me with everyone you know. Don't run with gardening shears. And as always, I send you and yours love and light and happy crafting. For more detailed information, better pictures, and product links, please visit my website at cardcutups.com.